Hello, everyone. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to get started with you guys. Hi, Emma. Christina Cass is in the house. Hi, Sandy. Hey, everyone. So if this is your first webinar with me, I'm just going to kind of chat at you guys for a few minutes while it gives an opportunity for everybody else to get here. If this is your first time, please know that there is a questions box down below. We use that frequently here on GoToWebinar. It's one of my favorite features, as a matter of fact. So as we're kind of cruising through today's class, I'm going to be throwing some questions back your way. And like all things, the more you kind of work with me, the more I can help you out during this class. I'm really excited to see so many people register for this particular one because I think sales and focusing on sales is one of the last things we tend to do as dog business owners. I know I was certainly guilty of that personally. And it really turned out that it was the reason why I struggled in other areas that I didn't realize were actually connected to the power of sales. So I'm really excited to kind of cruise through. I've got a lot of really good stuff organized for everyone. But having said that, I'm also very open. So if you guys have any specific questions, topics, anything at any time, don't hesitate to speak up. Let me know. So without further ado, let's see here. I think I'm going to go ahead and get things kicked off in just a moment. So I'm trying to think. So I'm like, Christina's on this call, Emma's on this call, Sandy's on this call. I think it looks like quite a few of you guys, Karina's on the call, quite a few of you guys have already been through some level of, I'm looking down at your guys' names and the cameras up here. But most of you guys, it looks like, have actually gone through some level of business coaching and have already had some training around sales. So probably do a lot more kind of Q&A today. I've definitely got a lot of stuff that I want to cruise through though. All right, so let's go ahead and officially get kicked off. So for everybody, and I know some of you guys already know the answer to this, but for everyone, first question is, how are you already doing your sales in your business? Primarily what I'm looking for is, are you doing like an in-home consult process? Are you doing it over the phone? Are you visiting their house? Are you having them come to you? Tell me a little bit about what your beginning process is. There's always things that we can do to make improvements depending on where you're used to being and kind of where you're getting started. I will say that around Grassroots, a lot of my clients' clients, we prefer phone sales, and for a multitude of reasons, especially for those of you guys that have pre-existing businesses, are relatively busy, all that good stuff. If you guys are curious why, feel free to ask. But let me know, definitely let me know. And there's a questions box down below. It looks like quite a few of you guys are currently doing the in-home consultations, which we'll kind of take a little bit of a look at. So one of the things that I know I've heard back from a lot of people is how do you actually perform a consultation? How do you, because you've got to remember that a behavioral consult, going in and having that first session, is the sales process. I mean, that's kind of discovery number one. By the way, if you don't have a notebook or something to take notes with, grab one now, because you're going to need one. I've got a lot of specific stuff for you guys to jot down. Hi, Erin. Erin is actually one of the reasons why I decided to do this webinar. It's such a frequently asked for topic for people that have actually started working on their businesses. Nobody thinks they want to learn about sales, but once you dig into the elements surrounding it, marketing, for example, your program design, all of those things actually do impact sales. So as a business coach, and as somebody that, if you have hired a business coach, somebody like myself or Christina Cass, Kristen Lee, there's quite a few business coaches out there these days. But what you find is once you start working with a coach, there's a lot of things that do come back to sales. So this is a really common topic that I'm asked to teach, clients and things like that. Lots of different people in the industry. I'm just glad to be doing. I think this is the first public one that we've done. So again, thank you, Erin, for kind of sparking the conversation here. So really, that's topic number one, area number one thing that I would have you guys write down is a consultation is a sales process. So if you're not used to already looking at it as the same thing, I would start that right away. So one of the things that we need to look at from the beginning standpoint of sales for a lot of you guys that haven't already had coaching is what are you doing during your consultation time? This is a beginning sales process, and there's certain things that I would make recommendations about. There's certain things that I wouldn't do as well as would do. So we're going to cover some of those things. So next question, I actually have, this comes up a lot in my beginning coaching calls with people, because I always ask people about, well, tell me about your coaching process, your consulting process, your sales process. And one of the things a lot of people report back to me is that they have a form that they sit down with their clients and they kind of fill out the form as they're going along. That's one of the things I actually recommend. Shit can that as soon as possible. For those of you guys that are dealing with what we would consider excess leads, you have to be careful with the recommendation I'm about to make. If you have an overabundance of leads coming in, having some preliminary paperwork, a lot of you guys are familiar with that process. That's more of actually a marketing process, I digress. But you can have a little bit of a process that gets that information before talking with them. So I would recommend that, but do not clog up your arteries, so to speak, during your actual consultative time initially with clients, because this is also, again, sales time technically. And you want to be able to be present. You want to be able to connect with them. It's amazing how a clipboard and a checklist can actually prevent you from really diving in and developing the trust and the relationship that you really need in order to develop a good student. So that's number one. Make sure there's no questions rolling in so far. La, 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 la. Oh, I see you, Erin. Erin says hi, and thank you for doing this. Always love learning from you. Thank you, my dear. You're so welcome. Yeah, this is a good, and I'm, you know, it's like, okay, here's a webinar. You guys are on a webinar with me. I was talking actually with one of my clients that also now does some, helps me a little bit with marketing, Kristen. And I was like, yeah, you know, I just miss teaching. I love teaching. I love being able to jump in and help people with stuff. So truly, it's an honor to be here. So don't use oops, I'm going to start hitting my table. I'm very Italian, you guys. But you're going to start by not using a form. You're going to try to practice being very present, which we'll get more into a little later on. One of the other rules of thumbs that is really good for beginners is the idea of ask, show interest, and share. And what that means is when you're first kind of getting to know a client, you're going through that consultative process, be aware of the quality of questions you're asking people. It amazes me how few people have been trained to actually go in and develop a real relationship, really ask not the right questions, but just ask genuine questions of interest. Find things you might have in common, and then share a little bit about yourself that might feel resonated with what they've just shared with you. This kind of equal back and forth vibe is really, really, really healthy when you're setting the stage for the style and type of relationship that you need to create between you as a leader and the student, aka the follower, but also you have to be equal in those kind of beginning phases of building that relationship, because you do need to bring them to a place of realizing that they need your time and expertise, and you have to have that monetary exchange later on, aka sales. Sales is not a bad thing, it's just part of the process. So don't rush yourself to that end result, guys. Stop and practice those three things: ask, show interest, and share. Ask deeper questions beyond, well, did your dog jump up, or what are your issues with your dog? I mean, people will go on and on, but also notice how a lot of you guys will also struggle with things like clients or the people you're first talking to. You ask them a question, they kind of go off on a tangent. This ask, show interest, and share idea is actually really great for that, because you're able to kind of use it to interrupt and kind of redirect the conversation. So again, it's a really priceless skill and a very easy thing that you can start implementing literally going into your next consultation, like today or tomorrow. Another beautiful thing about really keeping to a simple structure for consultation or consultative sales process is learning to keep to the whys, not hows. Now, my clients and other business coaches clients understand and have already learned the concept of teaching people the whys, not hows, especially when it comes to marketing and things like that. This is a really good rule of thumb as well when it comes to the sales process, and especially like if you're doing in-home consultative sales, you haven't switched to the phone yet, which is fine for right now. So what does it mean? Whys, not hows. It means when you hear somebody say, for example, oh, well, I don't like to crate my dog anymore. And you're thinking to yourself, well, the dog's, chews up the butter every chance he gets. He's constantly counter surfing. He jumps on the guests. He's chewing the leg of the couch. Like, obviously this dog needs to be crated. And instead of you going into, I'm going to show my value by telling them everything that they need to do, you can ask them a few more questions and guide them into why a crate might be a good idea instead of how to implement it. Right? It's the trying to get the how stuff to fit into that consultation process that burns us out. Think about that for a second. You're in a consult, you're hearing all of this stuff that's going wrong, you're getting triggered and going, oh my God, I've got to fix this all right now. And we very easily are overgiving parts of our personalities, which, let's face it, if you were on this webinar, you struggle with being too much of an empath or being too overgiving, or not knowing how to set strong and healthy boundaries. It's a thing. This is why sales is partially so important. So try to stick to that rule of thumb. How can you cover the why, not necessarily the how? All right. Take a little pause, see if we got any questions rolling in. By the way, again, you guys, this is your time with me. So if you've got any questions, you need me to slow down, you want to redirect me, let me know, because I'm here for you. I'm here for it. Sandy says, I would like your take on remote training sessions and how to make them the most effective and how you price them compared to facility or in-home lessons. That is a fabulous question, and it pains me to say that would be a really good topic to cover if we're talking about like program design. I'm a huge supporter of what we call fusion programs. So this allows trainers to utilize the elements of online courses and things like that without it losing its value. However, a lot of times people misunderstand the idea of having digital courses, being able to work at a distance from clients, that somehow means that you don't or shouldn't have to do like sales calls and heavy consultations and stuff still with clients. The reality is, in order to, it kind of depends on where you're at and what the purpose is, but there's very specific ways that are recommended and taught to actually make those digital courses happen, which oftentimes people are shocked that there's nothing passive about it. But again, there's a lot, my clients know, they're already kind of going, oh man, like somebody hold Maggie back, because program design, online courses and fusion courses are literally like my jam. We've literally done more work in the industry around program design and replacement stuff like you're talking about and asking about than any other company in the industry right now. So perhaps I will actually do another webinar covering just that question, because trust me, I could do an entire series without shadow of a doubt. But if we do look at, how does an online course or something like that affect the sales process, we're still looking at, we need to have really good, clear, like marketing lead generation. Those of you guys that have worked with me, worked with one of my clients, know how serious lead gen is. And you still need to figure out what sales process you're going to go with. Passive sales processes where you don't get on the phone with people, you're just simply sending emails, things like that. You're looking at a 1 to 2% conversion on what we call a low end offer. So that's going to be one of those $97 products per class per person. It takes a lot of time and energy to actually fill that kind of stuff. So it's a whole different kind of category of business all on its own. So yeah, again, great question. Totally want to do an entire webinar just around that one thing. Okay, so moving on, one of the things that we kind of have on the agenda to chat about is what I call the 3 main sales habits. These are like the 3 main pieces of focus that I teach all of my clients, and those of you guys that work with me are actually going to recognize some of this stuff. This is one of my absolute favorites. So the 3 sales habits that you absolutely need to practice all the time in order to counteract that feast or famine mode. A lot of you guys know, especially in this industry, because so many of you originally start with relying on word of mouth and your results speaking for themselves kind of a mentality. You're going to have feast or famine. So these 3 things are going to actually help you dramatically. I call them the 3 C's. Right? You're either focused on calls, AKA sales calls, clients, or content. right? Calls, clients, content. And let's talk a little bit about all three and the importance of all three. I mean, shit, you guys, this is stuff that I wrote this stuff down because even for me at the point I'm at in my business, this stuff comes in so handy for me at times, especially it's like the weeks where I might be not for me, I don't feel burned out so much anymore, but sometimes, like Christina knows, sometimes I'll overbook myself. Like I just went through a run like that towards the end of the spring where I was like in and out of events nonstop for like, what was it, like 2 months or something. And on the tail end of that, it was like, all right, I was babying myself a little bit. And even for me, what I was able to do is just go, okay, keep it simple. What do I need to focus on? I'm either making, doing consultations with new people or reaching out, getting on the phone with other businesses, perhaps that I've got an interest in, doing a joint venture with or something like that. So calls, clients, helping my clients, building new materials for them, getting on the phone with them, whatever that might mean, but taking care of clients, and then content creation, working on making sure that I'm creating stuff and that my marketing plan is running smoothly. I swear to God, you guys, if you focus on those three things in your business, all hell could be breaking loose. And that's the best way of not just refocusing, but kind of giving yourself a way of naturally prioritizing things without really having to think about it. It's amazing. So get on the phone, whether that's primarily sales calls, remember, or making new connections with other local professionals that you might be able to find clients through. You might share mutual clients, things like that. Sometimes we call those hustle plans as well in our community. The clients, again, taking care of your people. That includes checking in and going and doing lessons, right? Training a dog, which you got to be careful because sometimes you working with your own dogs or doing like competitive stuff will chew up some of this time. So those of you guys that are into dog sports as also a hobby and stuff, you just got to be really, really careful about how you flex your time. And then again, content. Now, this is one thing, it could be an entire separate kind of webinar or mini class. Content and marketing and really designing and creating stuff that's unique is very, very important. I find the vast majority of new consultations that I do, I'd say 1 out of every 20 people that I talk to, really for years now, and I used to be one of them years ago, are terrible with content creation. They're constantly sharing the works of other people. There's nothing really original, and the content is important because it kind of helps place you in a certain level within your specific community. So it's really good for finding leverage and kind of putting yourself where you feel like you need to be. So next thing on the agenda, hold on a second. I'll kind of break in between some of my working points here. Sandy says, thank you, Maggie. I will look for a future session on this. Yeah, and also a heads up to Sandy, and for those of you guys that had some interest in kind of the conversation a few minutes ago around online courses, there's a couple of really good full ones, like conversations, deep dives into that kind of stuff that I have done in the past. I believe one of which is uploaded and available on our YouTube page for Magic Maggie or Grassroots Dogs something or other. I kind of dropped the ball on YouTube like 3 years ago. I used to do a lot of fun stuff, but on occasion we do actually upload that stuff. So you might want to check there. That might have some really good information for you guys. Erin, that's great. The 3 C's, love it. Yeah, like I said, I'm giving you guys some, it might sound really simple, but these are some really heavy hitting techniques and concepts, especially for those of you guys that haven't worked with me. And then here we go. Here we are with Erin, excited over something. And Erin's actually physically been here before with Christina Cass's crew for almost a week. It was a 5-day retreat specifically around sales. So everybody gets a little something. I feel like Oprah. I'm like, look under your chairs, everybody. You get a thing, and you get a thing, and you get a gold nugget. Y'all get gold nuggets. Okay, so the next kind of topic that I wanted to cover with you guys is coaching traits. These are kind of traits and habits and ways of communicating that will not only prep you to be more effective at your consultative sales process, but really there's a carryover effect into you just being a better leader, teacher, educator for your clients. this is kind of the area where, for those of you guys that feel like you're overgivers, right? You have an empathy. While empathy is a beautiful thing, I know like one of my sticking points with my personality style is that my empathy was so big that like I wouldn't have anything left over for myself or even at times new people. As a matter of fact, the consultation I had first thing this morning was from a woman, beautifully open and honest with me. She was like, look, I feel like I'm at a point where I'm having like a mental health crisis because I love my clients so much that I feel paralyzed anytime I get a new lead in. I can't even talk to anybody new. And it makes me sad because that's not the first time that I've heard that kind of a story. It's one of those things that comes up a lot for people. And again, one of the reasons why I'm like, fucking sales, you guys, is so important, because we're talking about something beyond just being good at what you do. This is the kind of stuff that when you're so good at what you do and you're super empathetic, have a big heart, a lot of you guys are out there damaging yourselves emotionally, which is not cool. So here are some pretty simple habits to be aware of to start kind of practicing and getting yourself into if you're trying to get out of that trap while still establishing an even healthier relationship with already pretty awesome clients, right? Number one, this is going to sound like a no-brainer, but I really want you guys to hear this one. Be present. Be present. Every single one of you is going to be like, oh, but I am. No. Be truly present. How many of you guys have been introduced to counsel, to the idea of counsel? Mind you, I teach high-end sales, probably at the highest level of anybody else in the industry, but I'm also super woo-woo, so don't let that confuse you about who I am. Let me cover counsel with you guys really quick, because for me, I thought I was a super present person, and I still believe I am. However, I know that there are certain things that we kind of get ourselves tricked into that make us not so present. I don't know why. I feel like I want to. So hold on. Let me go get my talking stick, which was a gift to me recently. Which, by the way, so Christina cast this with me when I got this as a gift from one of my mentors years ago. And look at what was on top of it. Some of you guys will recognize this guy. Boop, 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 boop. It's a little talking piece. All right, but enough of the dick jokes. So counsel, this is literally a talking piece. And counsel was an old, for those of you guys that aren't aware, a very old Native American tradition that really spanned through almost all of the conceivable tribes that you can think of. It's a very simple concept. Everybody has seen a talking stick. They understand the base principle, but let me share with you something that's a little bit deeper than that. So how many times have you guys been listening to a client, they're going on and on or whatever, and you're already thinking in your mind how you're going to respond and how you're going to fix that, and basically it triggers all of the things that you think you know in your brain. Probably a lot of them you do know. But nonetheless, all that stuff gets brought up in moments where clients are trying to share something with us. This literally happens to every single one of us, including myself. Still, I find my mind wandering, right? It does happen, even though I'm a very present person. So practicing counsel, what it allowed the older kind of traditional cultures to do is, it's the idea of if you don't have the stick, you're not thinking about yourself. It's a constant reminder. And what was able to transpire is a lot of these people had some phenomenal communication skills. If any of you guys have ever done research on the ways that they used to come up with resolving conflict, for example, in a lot of their kind of native villages before we started fucking with them, of course, was really beautiful. Women, by the way, were also predominantly in charge and had the final say in most of their cultures, especially in the Cherokee. So the idea of the talking stick is still relevant in my mind today, because if you can honestly tell me that you've never caught yourself with your mind wandering while a client's trying to share something with you or whatever, then you know, you're probably lying to yourself, would be my guess. So, or you were like Jesus Christ himself and like more power to you. So, and I'm not saying pull out a goddamn talking stick when you're in the middle of doing a consultation with clients, but do have a way to ground yourself. If you find yourself self. I just looked out the window, my cat was like pouncing on something. But to find a way to ground yourself when you are in counsel with them, because that's literally what you're doing. You're passing the talking stick back and forth. And if you guys remember earlier in this class, I was talking to you and teaching you guys about the idea of ask, find interest, and share. It's very much the same kind of a concept. It's like ask your question, find interest, be present with them, right? It goes back to that whole concept of, are you truly present? No, because none of us are. So find ways of kind of grounding yourself. And certainly there's some of these tools can help you. And actually sometimes what I do is I do hold on to something. I'll play with something in my hand. I'm very, my clients know that that's very much a thing for me. But I will find myself, you know, doodling and doing something like that because it keeps me more focused on them, believe it or not. So I will oftentimes sit there and like play with something while I'm having a conversation. And including when I'm live with people. My clients that have been in retreats with me know I play with pens like a motherfucker. And if you guys haven't noticed that, next time you see me, like watch for it because I do that. I will find something and I'll sit there and I'll like pick it apart while I'm like deep in thought with you. It's just a thing. All right. So here's the other thing. Another thing to be aware of, especially if you're like one of those super big empaths or whatever you want to call it, you have a really big heart and you tend to give a little bit too much. This is just a reminder, something to be aware of. There's a difference between having the gift of servitude, the gift of service, right? You are giving a service back out to the world. It's a very special part of you. You don't have to be doing it. You could be, you know, choosing a multitude of other careers in your life. You've chosen this path for a reason. It's a gift, right? You do not want to be beholden to the chains of servitude. There is a difference. You are in service. You are not a servant. This one literally had to be spelled out to me a long time ago by a couple of different mentors that I had. It took me a while. I'm a little stubborn, to be perfectly honest. I just couldn't get that delineation, that difference for the longest time. But when it really finally hit me, I was like, whoa, yeah, no, I am not anybody. You are not your client's servants. Just because they're paying you a little bit of money doesn't mean that you have to bend over backwards. Your job is to do the best you can. And unfortunately, dogs are also, I'm going to go on a rant now. I'm just going to go on a fucking rant with you guys. One of the biggest issues that I see with people around anxiety and sales and all that stuff is this fear of, well, what if I can't do X, Y, Z? And it's like, there should not be any guarantees ever for dog training. Because it's like an oncologist, it's like becoming a doctor that serves people with cancer. There is no guarantee you can show up every day, do the absolute best job in your power, humanly possible. The actual end results are out of everyone's control. There are plenty of different types of tradespepeople and workmen's and just different things that you can do with work that are similar in nature. You know, not everybody that has a job is going to know the perfect outcome all of the time, and especially when it comes to health or animals or nature. I mean, you just can't control some things. So and we all know that, but we still put pressure on ourselves, especially around sales, to make sure that everything's like pitch perfect. And then that's when we really easily fall into that habit of just overgiving more and more and more. Yeah, that's such a big one for so many people that I talk to. So the third one is the customer's not always right. It's kind of goes a little bit with some of the stuff that we've already talked about. The customer's not always right. If they were, then you'd be out of a job. They wouldn't have any need to hire you. This also goes along with the idea of objections. A lot of times when you're doing consultation, aka a sales process, even though nobody wants to call it that, still sales. When you get to that point, you're trying to show people, hey, you really need help. I can help you. That's one of the three things most of you guys on this webinar have already heard, but I'll cover it again really quickly anyway. There's three things that need to line up in order for there to be a green light for you to ask for a sale, basically. Number one, do they want help? If they're sitting there saying, yes, I would like help with that. And that's one of the ways, by the way, a little side note, is if you feel like you're going in too much with somebody or somebody's putting too much pressure on you to tell them something, just say, do you want help with that? Okay, great. We'll get to that later. Later meaning they have to sign up for a program of yours or for a lesson or whatever it is you're selling. So do they want help? The answer is yes. Great. Can you help them? Huh? A lot of you guys are probably going, yeah, most of the time when I show up, I can help them. And do you want to help them? Do they want help? Can you help them? Do you want to help them? If all of those three things, you're answering the answer with yes, then you're good to go. There's no reason why you can't offer them something. Now, as you're offering them, objections come up. One of the easiest things to remember is the fact that an objection is not somebody saying no. An objection is somebody being very much interested in getting some help and hiring you. They're just feeling a little unsure. It's almost like shit just got real. It's like, oh, fuck, I've got somebody that's going to support me through this to the best of my dog's ability, not your ability, but the dog's ability, right? And you got to be able to help them pass that. And that's partly what I mean by the customer's not always right. Plenty of times when somebody tells me, oh, I just need to put off working on my business before I can do this, this, and this, I know historically and from just the numbers game that that's bullshit. It never helps anybody for people to continue putting things off, because then they just prolong the misery essentially for themselves. So I have a duty to be honest with people and let them know when they're fucking their shit up, when they're not doing things that I feel like would be the most helpful for them. So don't be afraid to again, be present and really speak the truth, be honest, handle the objections, because that just means you're one step closer to actually helping somebody instead of letting them slip through the cracks, which never did anybody any good at all. So any questions, comments, feedback at this point? I'm going to take a little breaks these, have some water, then have some more coffee. I like to transition between the two. I had a lot of fun writing this one out, by the way. I almost did a whole bunch of slides and I was like, meh, I'll let you guys see me on camera, jump on, have a good time. If you guys are good on questions and everything right now. Hey, Jamie, what's going down, girlfriend? Welcome. Yeah, I hadn't even noticed your name pop in. Ah, hey, girl, hey. Oh, John's in the house too. Oh, Jesus, you guys, we got a full house. Hi, everyone. There's so many of you guys that are joining us. I didn't even notice you. Kind of got started and didn't look at the names in the last, I don't know, half an hour, 20 minutes, something like that. All right. So how are you guys doing? Let me kind of check in with all of you guys first. I'm gonna move this thing because it's distracting me. What kind of questions do you guys have specifically around your sales process you might have for me today? Because we've got a little bit of time to go into Q&A. I've got some wrap-up notes, but they're really not important. I'd rather find out what you guys are interested in, what's vibing with you, what's not, you know, what kind of questions might you have that have popped up since listening to all this, because I love taking it to a personal note. Aaron writes in, what are some good tools to help people brand new to sales get into the mindset they need to? Tips, tricks, and routines. You know, Aaron, my honest answer is to get on the phone. Honestly, I think as you're building a routine and a rhythm, and that's really the big thing, is just prioritizing it, right? Making sure that getting on the phone, and that includes for those of you guys that are still doing in-home consultations or in-person consultations, there's nothing wrong with that. I tend to use that as a strategic approach in very specific business circumstances, which we won't go into, but sometimes I find that it's beneficial. However, even if you're still practicing in-person consultations, consultative sales, AKA, right, you're still going to need to spend time on the phone. So just getting into the habit of picking up the phone and being a little uncomfortable with it really is the best tip to kind of get into it. As you do it, even within a couple of days, you can start building more of a fun routine around it. Personally, what I do, I actually don't have it right next to me, so I was sitting outside. I pause and take little breaks, and I do music. I play music. I played Shady Grove right before jumping on with you guys here. I was actually like 3 minutes late showing up because I was like in a really good jam and I didn't notice the time. So that's part of what I do, but it's not. For me, it's shifted. It's not about getting myself pumped up because I get pumped up by being present, by being in the conversations themselves. There's this interesting thing that I've kind of noticed habit-wise between people that get really good at their sales process versus people that continue struggling. The people that continue struggling are the ones that tend to spend the most time trying to find ways to make themselves feel better before getting on the phone, rather than the people that tend to get good at sales are the ones that find joy and find excitement with the calls themselves. It's kind of like dog training in a way. The way that I used to tackle dog training as a mindset is I wanted my dogs enjoying performing the behavior, not the reinforcement afterwards. I wanted the behavior to be the most exciting and I wanted the afterwards to be the most boring. So I had a dog that was very motivated to want to do stuff all the time for me. And having trained like that, my clients, my actual dog owners used to come back to me, used to complain. It's like, well, not complain. I always thought it was funny that their dogs wouldn't stop listening to them. It was like, my dog's well behaved all the time. Like, is there an off switch? Like, what the fuck? Because the dogs innately enjoyed performing the work for the sake of the work, not to get to the after effect of me throwing a ball or something. So very much, I kind of tend to approach this stuff very similarly. You know, as a matter of fact, I almost shared this with everyone at the beginning of this call with you. What we usually call these calls, with this call with you guys. One of the things I've been kind of reminding myself of recently that I realized I've never really talked to most of you guys about. Perhaps you've heard me talk about it a little bit if you're a close client of mine, you've been around me a lot, like physically and like retreats. I was homeschooled as well from 6th grade, from 7th grade on. So basically all throughout middle school and high school. And that's enough to say, yeah, okay, I was homeschooled. But the difference with me, I always laugh when I tell this story. I was left to my own devices to have to try to figure out how to homeschool myself. Now, what that meant is nobody put books in front of me that I should be studying during that time period. Nobody did anything to supply any amount of structure whatsoever, which was kind of ironic because my mother, no shit, single mom, my entire childhood, she still is single, I digress. But she 2 years in a row during this time was voted the #1 teacher in the state of Washington. But I'll tell you, I never saw any of that at home. She was obviously very busy and devoted to her career as well. I had this really almost bizarre experience in that day and age where I was left to self-educate, to have to figure out how to find routine, how to self-motivate. There's so much stuff that we study in school. Like I can imagine at least being in high school, having to study some of this stuff. And at least you got like a teacher and somebody like sitting down and putting things in front of you, which is ironic because that's what I do for my students these days, typically. But I also have a way of approaching it from, well, you guys are so much in the same situation I was in when I was a teenager, and being in business for yourself, right? You have to learn to become self-disciplined. And in doing that, it's also okay to learn how to cut some corners, right? So anyway, I just went off on a little bit of a tangent. But I hear you guys on that, well, how do I come up with structure or whatever to help me do more of this thing? And the reality is, and this is why I guess I was thinking about the homeschooling piece, is I always, so like, for example, with math, I didn't like math. So I have had to and did find ways of getting involved in math in a way that I actually enjoyed doing it. So part of what I did as a teenager is I started my first business. I was doing other side businesses. I had 3 part-time businesses. And I started learning more about math through like budgeting and accounting and stuff like that, just because business interested me. So I was able to find an area. Oh, and the same thing with like geometry. I learned more about geometry when I first projects I did with clients around setting up businesses and facilities and all that kind of stuff. I would practice helping lay blueprints and all that. So I found a way to be present and enjoy it anyway, I guess is what I'm saying. So that's become for me a really, really helpful. It's like just find joy in the art of doing the thing, not trying to go reward yourself afterwards, which, by the way, I just had a conversation with another client I'm working with that's more recently started into refining her sales process. And she reported back to me last week and was talking to me about the stuff that was happening. It was like it was describing the last couple of weeks for herself. And I'm listening, and all of a sudden I'm like, and she had never hinted on it specifically, but all of a sudden I was like, hey, wait a minute. Are you doing that thing where you're getting on the phone and you're making your calls and you're deciding to quote unquote reward yourself and stop making sales calls after having a quote unquote good conversation? And she started laughing and she's like, you and your fucking crystal ball, like, how did you know that? That's exactly what I was doing. And I wouldn't even realize that that's the thing that I should have told you. Yet I still figured it out because of the patterning. So it's just kind of a funny little side moment. But that's one of the things that I would also be careful of, because it's that mindset is very blended into that idea of trying to kind of make yourself feel better before getting on the phone. And then the end result usually is, well, I'm going to get off the phone to make myself feel better, to reward myself. So just be very careful about that kind of a mentality. Aaron says, I hate math and my dad is a math teacher. It's a big family joke. Yeah, well, I think it's good I think it's fine when we're like, oh, I don't like doing this thing. I hate math. My problem used to be, I used to say that I sucked at math. Now I'm like, actually, no, I'm really good with numbers, especially running calculations in people's businesses. I got an opportunity to do one of those earlier today, where basically it's like you run the numbers of exactly what people are doing now, and there's certain, just basically it's 4 questions I have to ask. That's it, to figure out base calculations for what people are already bringing in. And then I get to calculate how much money they're leaving on the table, and how much more they could be making without adjusting how much time and energy they're actually putting in the business, which is fucking awesome. People love it when I do that shit for them, because those are oftentimes, that's like the reboot plan that I'll put people through. It's like, well, if you're already busy and fucked with your schedule, let's find ways of making more without you putting in more time. And because a lot of you guys, you have businesses that are generating leverage already. It's just about using those resources that you've already built up in a way that's going to benefit you more. It's going to stretch your time and energy a lot further. And then I find that's when clients actually have time and energy to then apply the other stuff that I teach, which is awesome. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, math was not my friend, but I'm damn fucking good at it these days, especially with like all of the advanced financial stuff that I find myself teaching, especially the last year and a half or so. All right, what other questions do you guys have? We've still got about another, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes together. I'm just gonna hand it over to you guys, and if you guys are good, we can wrap the webinar up. Any question goes, bring it, especially if it's sales related. I love all questions. I'll let you guys know if it's going to be for a different topic, but I still love those questions because that allows me to pre-prep on other stuff, which is always fun. More. Christina's probably laughing at me. She's like, oh, you're like me, always doing more. More. Boo, boo, boo. I'm going to double check my list. I'm pretty sure I covered everything. Boo. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. One of the things that I had written down, you guys can't see what I'm reading right now. One of the things that I'd written down earlier was just kind of like a highlight under the word boundaries. My God, how many of you guys struggle with boundaries, personal boundaries or like professional boundaries with clients? Honestly, raise your hands. Be like, me. See, such as I. How many of you? Oh yeah. Yeah, boundaries are a bitch for a lot of us. That's one of those things, like, you know, I guess in closing, I was so fucking resistant against the idea of sales. I thought it was a dirty word, didn't fucking like it, because I was really naturally good at what I did. but then I overgave and almost burned myself out. And I mean, even fucking, oh my God, you guys, sales, actually focusing and learning, because I don't know how many of you guys know, but part of my history with sales, I've had a couple of coaches, and then I worked with one of the top sales coaches and consultants in the world. It's part of the reason that I was down in Australia doing some live event stuff, brought my clients down there at one point. It was amazing. And it really, it's because I realized that sales opened up this whole different portal of like spiritual living in my business that I didn't even fucking know existed. One of the things that I've really had a fun time around more recently is when you start to promote this level, this is higher level sales, and you start to do the program redesigning around it, and you start to adjust your marketing to kind of reflect those changes, and you just make a slightly stronger system. What happens is all of a sudden you're bringing in phenomenal clients, people that value you, that trust you, that you really enjoy being around, but you're not overgiving. You've got energy left over. You can actually expand your business without overhead. That's one of the things that not drives me crazy, but it makes me sad that people don't realize that there's a different way to grow a dog training business. I see a lot of people having a shitty cycle with clients where you're overgiving and you're setting that tone and you're not doing any of the stuff that I'm teaching or that we teach. And what ends up happening is you set the pace, you set the expectation and your time, and then anybody you hire, we start looking at people that start to replace themselves in that really bad boundaryless zone with with employees or new hires or new trainers, and those trainers just play out the exact same cycle of burnout, which is not good. So having a really good sales process, but also having a really good program that you're offering in the process too, is such a fucking game changer for people. I don't even know where to begin. It's so much. So sales isn't just about making more money. It's about having better boundaries, being able to better serve people. It's about living literally a more balanced life yourself, because you start to learn how to detach yourself from other people's bullshit. And for those of us that have recognized ourselves as empaths or whatever, I say that word whatever now because I was hardcore, like I was there. I was all about it, you guys. I was in the zone because I am a naturally empathetic person, but I was giving away my goodies without knowing how to protect myself. And so that ain't good either. As they say, you got to put your own oxygen mask on first. So having those boundaries, having more peace in your life, not being more happy, or it's not about, because I think all of us at some point in our lives, we're like, oh, I got to find my purpose, or I got to find happiness. I got to find this, I got to find that. And then being able to learn what I've learned from sales and what I've been able to teach people is doing this actually allows you to see the whole world in a slightly different way, where you're just like okay with everything. You're not particularly attached to every single little thing that's going on around you anymore. You know when to kind of move in to help somebody and when to back away, and you never, well, I won't say never, because everybody ebbs and flows through all of their life lessons, but you'll find yourself being a lot less depleted and actually starting to burn out, or starting to fight that cycle of burnout, which is way too fucking relevant. That's one of the other topics that has popped up. I've been asked by several people recently to do another kind of series on burnout in the dog training specifically part of the industry, not just burnout for pet professionals in general. I was telling a client the other day in our private group, she was looking for more references and articles and stuff, and I was like, yeah, the only place you're really going to find it is in the veterinary community. Lots of people talking about those guys, but nobody really focused on how do you solve it in our industry, in our portion, in our sector of the industry. Because trainers are, man, we don't charge enough. We don't oftentimes charge enough. And actually, you know what? Hold on a second. There is one more thing. Let me catch up with everybody's questions. And then there was one more thing that I actually did want to share with you guys around sales that very much goes into. Sandy says, do you follow up with potential clients who you have made an initial contact with? And if so, how long do you want to contact them again? So that's a good question. So basically what I hear you asking, Sandy, and I think a lot of people might have this question. So once you've talked to somebody, a prospect, as a potential client, and then there's a long span of time that's gone on, do you contact them? If so, how often, etc.? It honestly, for what I teach, it depends on how the conversation ended. And what I mean by that is, well, it also depends on what your actual sales process is like. Some of my clients, we have a 2 or 3 step process, which is pretty defined. And by the very end point, they're very clear. Remember, there's those 3 questions to ask yourself before offering a sale. Do they want help? Do you want to help them? And can you help them, or whichever order you want there. And if all 3 of those things said yes, and you've made a pitch to them and they're making excuses or whatever, and you tell them this is the right time, and they're like, no, I'm not going to listen to you. For me, and for a lot of my clients, we recognize somebody like that as being somebody that's potentially just going to be in the habit of pushing back on every recommendation that you have. So my clients are not worried about those people that have fallen off at a later date, because if they're ready to change, they can come back to that professional. Now, I will recontact people if I deem that it's not the right time, right? So for example, somebody contacts me or contacts a client, and we're going through that whole process, consulting process, and the client or myself decides, you know what, I really think what you need to do is go try this, this, and this. Why don't you go do that? Or maybe even you're recommending that they try a different professional or a different thing in the interim. And if that doesn't work, let me know, and I'll maybe call you in 6 months or so and just check in on you and see how things are going. In which case, absolutely. And then when you reconnect together, if they've done those things, then great. That's a sign of a potential good client that's going to meet you halfway. And that's really what's so important about the beginning consult process and the sales process is it's an interview. It is an interview. It's your opportunity to set the stage to see how people work under pressure. If somebody's making lots of excuses, can't make up their mind, is very wishy-washy, you have to decide if that's somebody that you want to work with or not. So, but again, it just depends on what your sales process is and how you left that conversation off to begin with. How long do I wait? Again, I don't wait on anybody. So I think for me personally, I think I don't wait on anyone. If somebody reaches out and I do an initial consult and I'm like, whoa, this girl is ready, I can help her, she's saying she wants help, great. If, for some reason I decide, actually, this isn't a good fit, I'll be honest with them. So I'm so clear in my consulting process, I quickly move on to the next person. If somebody's showing me for whatever reason, especially if they've said that they've wanted help, I'm ready to go, and I can definitely help them. Yeah, I don't put them, I'll let people come back to me, if that makes sense. Because otherwise what happens is a lot of times what I see my trainers do and the people that I've worked with around sales, at first, the habit is to overanalyze the conversations that don't go well, or the people that say no, or the people that didn't say no, you just didn't handle their objections, so you let them get off the phone, and there was no resolution. And that's really the important thing. Your process should have a resolution. It's either yes or no. Maybes are usually where people are stuck and wanting to wait and contact people back later. I'm not a big fan of maybes. It's either yes or no, and it could be no temporarily. When it's no temporarily, those guys I'll definitely get back in touch with, but I give them something to do in the meantime. Again, I'm looking at it, for me, I'm always coming at it from, because I am more than a business coach, I am a natural teacher. I'm an educator, I'm a leader. So my natural inclination as an educator is to give people something to work on. Whether or not they do those things is a very clear indicator of how coachable they are. So if I say no to them, or if they are not ready and I agree with them and I'm giving them a few things to do, perhaps, with some people I do follow up. But again, those are under very specific circumstances. It's almost like it's part of that coaching or that guidance process. So yeah, honestly, it all depends. So one of the things that I wanted to chat about, just as kind of a last food for thought here, is the idea of building value. A lot of times, trainers, when they've started building their business up, they're busy, but they're kind of at that stuck point. It's like they've reached that ceiling. Typically, they haven't been charging as much as they need to. They're afraid of value points, things like that. Or even with younger trainers that are kind of coming into the scene, value, of course, is a very important thing to kind of take note of. And we're talking about innate value, not necessarily how many certifications you have, but how far you're willing to go to make sure that your clients are taken care of. Now, the vast majority of people that contact me, and of course the people I end up working with, all have one thing in common, and that is they are the type of clients that will bend over backwards and continue to bend over backwards until they injure themselves without the help of somebody like me, right? And so I know going into those coaching relationships with my clients that these are guys that need to be raising their prices. And so, of course, price increases very quickly. That conversation happens really quickly after kind of covering and going through the sales process, right? When I typically am kind of doing consultations with people themselves around their business. We start to look at, well, what are you charging? What are you selling? What kind of programs are you offering people at the end of that consult process? Now, my recommendation is go higher end. Right? Most of you guys, especially those of you guys that were drawn into this webinar, you've got way more that you're already giving than what you're currently charging for. And then some of you guys might be slightly on you're still starting your career side of the fence, but you still give a shit. And so one of the things that I recommend, if you're concerned about value, right? Because a lot of people, you can't just raise your prices without having a fucking emotional meltdown. So as you're doing that, be really clear with where your money is actually being allocated to. Now, this kind of goes back into my experience homeschooling myself. One of the things that I had to do is find ways of investing back into my education because despite the fact that my mom was a working professional, we were pretty fucking poor growing up. And so I had to find ways of smart investing into myself. And so what I did is, and this is where I originally learned it, and I do this still to this day, and I still teach this model, is you charge based on what your reinvestment strategy also is. For example, my client contracts, I have it set up so that I can reinvest a certain percentage back into my clients and then back into my education. It ensures that I'm, always have the right amount of money left over from stuff that I can go take a class, or I can go do a retreat of my own where I'm focusing on my business. Things of that nature. I make sure that I charge enough to continue supplying myself with what I need to continue my job at a higher level and at a good capacity. So making sure that you're clear that some of what you're asking people to pay for is in fact going back into what we would call a quality improvement cycle, or a continuous quality improvement cycle. Won't go into the whole Edward Deming. I'm a huge fan, by the way, of Edward Deming. Don't get me going, because I love to. But it is it's one of the best ways of feeding yourself within your business so that you're always cared for and you're always able to take that next step in your business, no matter what it is. Okay, well, you guys, we are at time. Normally, I'd love to hang out and go a little while longer for those of you guys that were able to make it and stay longer. But unfortunately, I actually have to go in for an interview for another a new radio show at the local radio station. Big surprise, right? So thank you guys all for joining me. If you have any follow-up questions, let me know. As always, I'm available for consults. I think I've still got a couple availabilities on the schedule for this week. I think I've only got a couple next week, but certainly if you want some help taking a look underneath your business hood, let me know, because there's all kinds of stuff surrounding this. There's always questions that people have. So let me know if you're interested. I'll be around. Send me an email, shoot me a message on Facebook, however is easiest for you. And that's it for now, guys. I will see you around, and hope you guys enjoyed yourselves. And thank you so much for joining me. Bye, everyone.